Hello, everybody. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is the Byte Show, and this is part 2 of Armageddon with Olaf Hage. Okay, Olaf.
Okay. Well, in the first part, we were showing that you can trust the book of Revelation. You can trust the Bible. Show you where it came from. I mean, there's a lot more we could say about it, but I wanted to give you some of the background so that you know that when we're talking about this book and these prophecies, they come from a particular Greek New Testament book that was known by the early apostles and handed on down to the church, and it's referred to by the early church fathers, and then by the time you get to the 4th century, and we got a few pieces and fragments of it in the 2nd and 3rd century. And by the time you get to the 4th century, it's a very well-known, famous book. And everybody knows about it. It didn't get invented in the 4th century. This isn't one of those books that church councils supposedly added to the Bible or something. As we showed in the first segment, that just didn't happen. They already had a New Testament. They already knew what it said. They were being martyred to try to by the pagans to try to get their hands on the New Testament and burn it, because they knew how valuable, how important this book was to the Christian community. And you can see from the descriptions of the martyrdom that the church experienced over this, that this book was very important to them. But you know, there were some people who wanted to kick this book out of the Bible. They thought there were some, especially in the eastern part of Turkey and so forth, there were places where people wanted to get rid of the book. Babylon didn't like it. Gee, I wonder why. Laodicea didn't like it. Ephesus didn't like it. There were people in Ephesus who were kind of upset about it. There were people in Sardis who didn't care about it.
Now, you're talking about the Book of Revelation.
Book of Revelation,
right.
Yeah. They didn't like the Book of Revelation because they thought that the Book of Revelation was attacking them, and specifically attacking the Christian churches in these cities.
Oh, yes.
Not so much in Babylon, but certainly in in Ephesus and Sardis and in Laodicea and in Pergamos. The Christian churches there were being attacked by Jesus in the book of Revelation. And the Christian pastors who ran those churches were being attacked. Well, you can imagine, even in the 4th century, you can imagine that the bishops in those places were kind of feeling uncomfortable every time the book of Revelation was being read in their church. Here is the bishop being referred to in the book of Revelation of that church and being attacked by Jesus. Yeah, kind of uncomfortable day in church, wasn't it? Let's skip that. We'll skip that chapter this week. The pastor was sick this week. We'll just he'll pick up with the next chapter next week when he comes back. I'm sure that there were a lot of uncomfortable days there. So they had a church council in the year 300 in the East, where some of the church councils, this was just a local council, but some of the church councils in the East got together, and they debated the book of Revelation. They said, well, we're not going to use it anymore. And so while they were at it, they had a problem. They said, well, gee, 2 Peter kind of quotes from it, and Jude kind of quotes from 2 Peter. And, maybe we ought to get rid of those two. Well, then some guy sat down and he says, you know what? If we get rid of 5 books, we can get the total down to 22. And that would make the same number of letters as there are in the Hebrew alphabet, and the same number of books or divisions in the Hebrew scriptures. Now, today we rearranged them to 39 books, but the 12 lesser prophets were all one book, for example. 1st and 2nd Kings and Samuel, so forth. A lot of these books were all bound together, seen as a single book.
Yeah.
So when the Jews counted originally, they counted 22. as Josephus tells us. And then later on, the Jews decided that that was causing some problems of various kinds with the Christians who were doing some funny math with it. They were adding 22 Hebrew scriptures together with 27 Greek New Testament scriptures, and they were getting a total of 49, 7 times 7. And so the Jews said, well, okay, we'll redivide our scriptures a little bit, and change it from 22 to 24 books. So that way the Christians will come up with a total of 51. And then over in the East, they had this church council where they tried to cut out 5 books: 2 Peter, 2nd and 3rd John, the book of Jude, and the book of Revelation, which was their real target, and cut it down from 27 to 22 books. And then they said, we'll use our Aramaic translation of it. And just to be on the safe side, we're going to re-render it from Greek into Aramaic. And that's where we get the Aramaic text from. Now, the funny part about this is the reference to 22 and 27 reveals immediately that all 27 books of the New Testament already existed by the end of the 3rd century, before the 4th century even began. And it tells you that the church in the East already had a 27-book Greek New Testament text, because the 27 was a sign that it was in Greek. That was another little indication. And you can go back to the 2nd century and the early church fathers, the apostolic fathers who had been literally baptized by the apostles and their immediate disciples. And these guys are writing about the scriptures and the church and so forth, and they, in their cite every single one of these 27 books, directly or indirectly. So the apostolic fathers knew all 27 New Testament books. So there was nothing added by anybody later. See the point? So there's nothing missing. So people want to argue that somehow or other the book of Revelation is unreliable, not all the churches had it in their Bibles. There are some churches to this day in the Eastern Orthodoxy that don't have the book of Revelation. But now you know why. So the book of Revelation is divided into 6 parts. The first and the last part are the envelope. In the old days, books used to have a prologue and an epilogue, an introduction and an appendix. There would be stuff in the back, like your index, your bibliography, appendices of various kinds, maps, charts, and so on. Be stuff at the end. And at the beginning, you would have your introduction, your foreword, your title pages, your table of contents, list of figures, little codes that you might use through the text that are abbreviated later on. You'd see that at the beginning. Scholarly works still are written like this, for those of you who haven't seen that kind of material. And in the middle is the meat of the book. Okay? Now, the book of Revelation follows this general pattern. The first chapter is your introduction. Your last chapter is your wrapping up section. Okay? And then you've got 4 sections in the middle that are divided into 20 individual chapters. They are 5 chapters each, approximately. There's a little bit of slop here and there where a verse or 2 is in the wrong section, but generally speaking, and it's in the right sequence. It's just that where they put the chapter headings are not always in the exact spot they should be in. A little bit of debate here and there. But for the most part, it goes like this. First portion was chapters, the first portion is chapter 1. And then we have the 4 sections, chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And those first 5 chapters take us all the way down to the end of the age. And then we have a second set of 5 chapters, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And you look at chapter 11, it's the 2 witnesses, takes us all the way down to the end of the age. And then we have another 5 chapters, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. What's chapter 16? It's about the end of the age. That's where the word Armageddon appears. And then we have the next 5 chapters, take us down to the Last Judgment even. But it starts with Babylon the Great and so forth in chapter 17, and it goes down to the Last Judgment, and that's 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And then 22 is this final envelope chapter, sort of epilogue. Now, this structure repeats the same pattern over and over again. It starts at an earlier point, it backs up to an earlier spot, and then goes forward to the end, to the last days, to the end of the age, and then it backs up, starts over, goes forward again to the end of the age, goes back and starts over again, and so on. Now, the biggest step back is probably chapter 12, at the beginning of the third section of 5 chapters, chapters 12 through 16, where it goes back to the birth of Jesus, which is actually, if you take a good look, it's earlier than any of the other sections. And it goes back earlier than any of them do. Then there is but it immediately jumps forward. The first section, where Jesus is talking to the 7 churches in Asia, it seems to be fairly current from John's own day. And then the section number 4 there, where it begins with Babylon the Great, is dealing with whatever Babylon the Great is. But if you look very carefully in there, it's saying 5 have fallen, 1 is, and some people say that the 5 that have fallen refer to the empires of ancient Egypt and Persia and Babylon and Greece and so forth, and the one that now is Rome. Well, ancient Egypt claimed to go back 18,000 years ago. So that one, technically, I guess you could say, makes references that go back even further than chapter 12 does. So they all begin with these backwards looks, if you will, to an earlier moment. And then they come in and they click and they go forward again. And it's almost like somebody's trying to park a car. And they pull forward, then they back up, and say, no, not quite right. And they go forward again, and they back up. Well, that's the structure of the book of Revelation. It's got these 4 sections in it. Now, the first 2 sections, from chapter 2 to chapter 11, create a kind of a lightning strike of material. And in chapter 7, it says, there was silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. And then there's a new revelation that begins. Well, I thought Christ had just come in chapter 6. But now we're going to go back now. We're going to start to talk about stuff that technically had already happened. And so they go back, and chapter 8 is talking about the third of the day taken away, the third of the night. It's really at the beginning of the tribulation again. And then chapter 9, we have the armies coming forward and so forth. So we're going back before Christ returns now, see? So there's a structure here. And again, the chapters from 12 through 21 are going to take us from the birth of Jesus all the way down to the Last Judgment. And they're going to take a zigzag when they get to the 2 witnesses and Christ returning. They're going to stop and they're going to say, wait a minute, let's go back and talk about Babylon the Great and its destruction. And there are references in there, as I said, to the empires of Egypt and Babylon and Assyria and so forth, all of these things which were way back many centuries, if not thousands of years earlier. So the book of Revelation has a formal structure to it. And I want to show you that so that you can see that you can't edit it very much. If you were going to fiddle with it, it would be hard to do, just to make sure that nobody did. There was a formal warning added right at the end in the epilogue section in chapter 22. And he said, if anybody adds or takes away from the prophecy of this book, some bad stuff was going to happen to him. If they were going to add the punishments described in this book. The plagues would be added to him. And if he took away, then he would lose his share in the New Jerusalem. So you've got to get punished if you add or subtract. Now, those who subtract, notice that they are people who are going to lose their share in the New Jerusalem. So he's saying that if any Christian who has a share in the New Jerusalem should edit anything of this prophecy out, that Christian will lose his share in the New Jerusalem. So that was directed at Christians. And when it talks about those who would add to the text, it's saying if he adds anything to this text, they would add from the punishments and the plagues described in the text. Well, those are for the non-Christians, for the people who were persecuting the church and so forth. So this is for non-Christians, now, which tells me the following. People who added new prophecies, came up with new stuff like the Gnostics, were outside of the church. Here's a reference that actually clarifies for you who these people are. And people who are trying to censor the text, like the churches of the East, who were trying to cut out certain parts of the New Testament, they were coming from inside the Christian church. So here was a prophetic hint as to who was going to be messing with the text before it happened. So here we have the book of Revelation laid out. So the book of Revelation now is going to cover, notice what it's going to cover. It's going to cross over the Battle of Armageddon 4 times. It's going to pass over that. Because if you get to Jesus coming, you're getting to the Battle of Armageddon 4 times. So in chapter 16, we have the Armageddon passage. In chapter 19, we have the Armageddon passage. You can find it pretty easy now. In chapter, I think it's 9 here, you have the Armageddon passage. And, chapter 11 is the Armageddon passage. Although it's not really, there's not a big deal made out of it there. We'll get to that in a second. And in chapter 6, you have the Armageddon passage. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? And it says here, and the kings of the earth, the great men, I've got to back it up here, but it says, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men. Does that sound like military guy stuff?
Yeah.
And every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens, in the rocks of the mountains, in Cheyenne Mountain out there in Colorado Springs, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, so he's ruling, from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Okay, now, then we go to chapter 11. And here we go again. And we have the 2 witnesses who've been prophesying for 3.5 years. And then it says here, let's go to verse 9. And they of the people and the kindreds and the tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. How do they do that? How can they all see that? How can all the nations watch their dead bodies lying on the ground there in Jerusalem? Television, the internet,
yeah,
iPhones.
Yes.
Okay. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts to one another, because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelled upon the earth. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Now, would that be a resurrection? Would it? That's a resurrection, right? So, they're being raised from the dead. The resurrection comes when? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, the trump of God shall sound, the great voice of the great archangel, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up like an eagle's talons, technically is literally what the Greek means here, and will be caught up by his angels from the four ends of the earth, and going back to Matthew and Mark 13, and will be gathered to meet him in the air, in the atmosphere, when he comes. Okay? So it's pretty clear. That won't be a secret. So there's a resurrection, there's a second coming, are gathering to meet him in the air. It's all happening at the same time. Resurrection, rapture, that's where the word rapture comes from, in that verse there in 1 Thessalonians 4:18. And then we're looking at the second chapter of 2 Thessalonians, and Paul continues here talking about this topic again. He says, I plead to you, I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord, parousia, same word he's used before here in the 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 14 through 18. And he says here, I beseech you, brethren, by the parousia of the Lord, which he had described in his first epistle to the same group of people, okay, that you be not quickly removed. Oh, and by our gathering to him. Okay, there's the rapture. So he's talking about the resurrection, rapture, and so forth. That day will not come except first be revealed. We can't be raptured. We can't be resurrected. Christ isn't coming back. He's not going to visibly appear. That's where we're coming there. Parousia means visible appearance. In fact, our word appear comes from parousia, the Greek word. And he says, that day will not come except first be revealed the man of sin, the son of perdition, which exalts himself so that he is called God and seats himself on the throne of God, in heaven. And literally in the Greek, it's talking about him hyper-elevating himself up upon everything which is called God, technically. So he's actually going up to seat himself on the gods, which is to say the gods, like Hermes, like Zeus, like Ares, or in Latin we would say Mercury, Jupiter, Mars. And so he's saying he's going to go up into outer space. He's going to seat himself up there. Well, the gods, we've seen it ourselves with our satellites, but human beings haven't gone there yet. And he says, so this man of sin has to do that. He has to go up there. Has he been up there yet? Not unless Neil Armstrong is the Antichrist. Or one of those other guys who went to the moon. And that's one place. We've been to one place. This is places plural. So in 2 Thessalonians, we've got to go to multiple places. And not us, but the Antichrist. The man of sin has to go there. He has to be revealed. And then he has to go and seat himself up there on those places, plural, at least two. Now, right now we're talking about going to Mars, and we're going to have a colony on the moon that we're going to use as an interim stepping-off point to go to Mars. And maybe we'll go to Titan, one of the moons of Saturn. And maybe we'll go to some of the outlying moons of Jupiter. Okay, we got stuff, that's on the drawing board to go to some of these places. But has the man of sin gone to any of these places yet? I don't think so. Has he been revealed yet? I don't think so. But he's supposed to rule for 42 months. How can Armageddon occur when the guy who's leading the bad army hasn't even been revealed yet? And how can this happen if this guy's got to go to Mars or the moon or Jupiter or Saturn or Venus or someplace? If he's got to go to some of these places, where is he? Where's the spaceship that's going to take him there? Well, he's using them alien UFOs. He's flying around, flying saucer. Well, now look. Then he's going to just pop up one day out of a flying saucer? Okay, fine, but we still got 42 months from that point. And we still got 3.5 years of the two witnesses, whom he will kill. He'll crucify in the same place where their Lord was also crucified, which, as I've shown, is the summit of the Mount of Olives. So here we have a clear indication, and which Ernest Martin before me showed was the summit of the Mount of Olives. Here we have a clear indication that you can't be anywhere near Armageddon if these things haven't happened yet. I always say to people, if the two witnesses aren't prophesying, you can relax, because it's at least 3.5 years away. At least. Now, so here in chapter 11, it goes on, and the Armageddon portion is sort of hidden in here, but you kind of have to see where it would fit. They stand up on their feet after 3.5 days, and everybody gets terrified who's watching them. And they're all watching on their iPhones, and they're getting scared, their iPads or whatever they're watching on at that time. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Enemies, notice that key word there. So the man of sin, the son of perdition, the beast, the Antichrist, the bad guy, the villain, Lucifer, I don't know, you come up with a name for him. And he's still alive and well on the earth. He's the guy who just killed him 3.5 days earlier. Says he makes war on the Lord's witnesses, and he overcomes them. So it says here that they're taken up, they're raptured. So we've got a resurrection, we've got a rapture. And then it says, and the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. That's a tithe of the city. And in the earthquake were slain men 7,000, plural, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. The word remnant is very interesting because it may refer to a prophecy in Amos that's quoted by James in Acts 15. And so he says here, that same hour was a great earthquake, and a 10th part of the city fell. 10th part of Jerusalem fell. Okay, so Jerusalem is now having a great earthquake. And 7,000 were slain. Now, 7,000 in Hebrew would be entire families. The word 7,000 means whole, complete, entire. That's 7, Shabuah. And in the word here for thousands is Aleph. And it would mean families, or in the plural, I don't know if it's Alephim or what, but the plural in the Hebrew, whatever it would mean families or teachers. It could mean a lot of different things. So, but it probably means here entire families are wiped out. That's a better way of thinking about it. Okay, whole families are killed. Will there be 7,000? At least 7,000 in the Greek text means 7,000 times at least 2. So it's at least 14,000 people could die. And his whole families are wiped out. So this is a huge earthquake. This is a fraction of the number of people who live there. So you're looking at a town of 70,000, 140,000 people. Current population of Jerusalem, I don't know, but it must be somewhere in that vicinity if you've seen photos lately. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, The kingdom of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Gee, where'd the Battle of Armageddon go? And the 24 elders which sit before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshiped God, saying, We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which are, was, and are to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and has reigned, or has begun to reign. Okay, the Greek tense here is probably aorist, if my guess is correct. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, the time of the dead, that they should be judged. So there has to be a resurrection, right? And that thou shouldst give reward unto thy servants the prophets. You can't do that if you don't raise them from the dead. And to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldst destroy them which destroy the earth. Battle of Armageddon. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testimony, or testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. Remember that word, hail, hailstones, okay? Now let's go to the Armageddon passage in section 3, chapter 16. And there's 7 plagues, and they're going to be poured out. Now, you know the 7th trump is the last trump. So that had to be the end there, right? And so now we're in chapter 16. This is the 3rd section. And there are 7 plagues, and they pour out the first plague, and there's sores coming on people because of the solar radiation. We were talking about the X-rays and how dangerous they are, they cause cancer and stuff like that. Well, the sun goes up there into the high frequencies, you're going to have skin cancer. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man. In other words, it dried up. And every living thing died in the sea. Every living soul died in the sea. So, obviously, if the water dries up, okay, water being evaporated, what do you need for that? Ultraviolet light, high-frequency light. Third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of waters, and they became blood. So even the springs now began to run so low that they became mineral heavy. So the iron in the water and the mineral content of the water became greater than the amount of water that you had. So the waters became, in other words, muddy. So water's being evaporated up. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art, and was, and shall be, because thou hast judged men, and they have shed the blood of saints and prophets. So persecution's already occurred. And thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. Okay? And I heard another out of the altar say, Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. And the 4th angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given him to scorch men with fire. And the men were scorched with great heat, and blasphemed the name of God, which hath power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. Okay, now, you can see here the sun is clearly acting up. The sun is getting hotter. The ultraviolet light is so fierce it's literally evaporating up the seas, the oceans. Has that happened yet?
No.
Okay. No evaporated oceans. And the 5th angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, the throne of the beast. And his kingdom was full of darkness. Now let me go back here. That's chapter 16. Let's go back to chapter 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, looks just like Daddy, the dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast, blasphemy means he's claiming to be God, or claiming to be Christian, or something like that. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, his feet, we know that description. And the dragon gave him, the dragon which is that old, Satan the dragon, mentioned in chapter 12 here. He names him Satan. We know who it is. It's not like it's a mystery. Okay, so this is the fallen angel, Shamael, called Satan or the adversary in Hebrew. And I saw, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat, or his throne, and great authority. That's a lot, because the earth, we are told, is ruled over by Satan at the moment, till Christ takes his power and begins to reign, okay, which is right at the end. So that's a lot of power he's given him. And then he says here, And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped. Who's they? All the world worshipped the beast, who was sitting on Satan's throne, which gave power unto the beast. Worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast. So all the world is worshipping Satan and is worshipping the beast, or the Antichrist. By the way, Antichrist here means substitute or fake Christ. It doesn't mean opposed to Christ, although technically he is, of course, because he's not the real Christ, but he's pretending to be Christ. So it says, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is this again? Let's go back, make sure here. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they, all the world, worshiped the dragon, that is Satan, which gave power unto the beast, that is this world ruler who's claiming to be Christ. And they, all the world, worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? He sits upon a throne, so he has a kingdom, right? So what is his kingdom now? All the world. And it goes on here, it says that there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. And, oops, I skipped something here. My thumb wandered. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? Well, gee, if all the world is worshiping him, there's nobody left to make war with him. See? Makes perfect sense. There was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. There's another indication he's claiming to be Christ. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So he has power for 42 months, which is 3.5 years again. Although if the moon is moved out of its orbit, it could be longer or shorter. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, claiming God's name, and his tabernacle, claiming God's house, and them that dwell in heaven, claiming that the angels belong to him and that they're his angels. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So he has power over all nations. All the world worships him. He's seated on a throne. His kingdom is universal. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Let me translate that for you. Put your gun down. Don't resist. It is the will of God that this guy rule for 42 months. Don't fight him, or you're going to be locked up. You're going to be executed. You're going to die in battle fighting a useless cause. He is going to overcome the saints. That is God's word. It's prophesied to happen. If you fight this guy, it says here, you're wasting your time. So be patient.
Yeah.
Be faithful. Just wait. Okay? People think, I'm going to fight him. We're going to fight him in the mountains. We're going to fight him in the cities. Oh, give me a break, please. All right. So it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake like a dragon. And this is your false prophet. Exercises all the power of the first beast before him, or in his presence, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein, that's the whole planet again, to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. I'm sort of polishing up my King James here a little bit. I don't say maketh. No, I say makes. Anyway. And deceives them that dwell on the earth by means, that's italicized in the King James because it's not in the Greek, by the miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So basically, don't fight, just hide. Don't go up against these guys. Okay, don't confront them. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, so that no man may buy or sell, save he that hath the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let he who hath understanding add up or count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. A is not a Greek word, so that can't be in the Greek. In anybody's Greek text, no matter what. There's no such Greek word as A. So it is the number of man, and his number is, the Greek is literally, even so it is 666, written with 3 Greek letters. And those 3 Greek letters harken back to the mark that was put on Cain's forehead in 3 Hebrew letters, which were Aleph, and Taw. It was Aleph, Vav, Taw, which is given in the Hebrew text. And it's the word mark in Hebrew, but it's like Alpha and Omega for Hebrew, because Taw is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. Well, Alpha and Omega is a mark of God. So he has a mark of blasphemy, the beast does. Oh, now you know what it is. Okay, so he's actually claiming to be God. He has this mark of blasphemy, which is the Alpha and the Taw, which would be AT&T. No, I'm sorry. It would be A and T, or if it were Hebrew, or A and O if it were Greek, and in our language it would be A to Z, or A and Z, or whatever. But it's some sort of mark along those lines. That's the idea here that we're talking about. And notice this, everybody, except for scattered people here and there who are avoiding taking this mark, hiding from the guys with the rubber stamps or the lasers or however they make the mark on you. And so the RFID chips, if you listen to Catherine, some of the other people out there. But all of this is happening to the world as a whole. There may be individuals in various places who are not going along with what the beast is doing, but the nations are. So the kingdom of the beast is cast into darkness. And now we're back to chapter 16. It was important to go back here so you can see what time it is. So in chapter 16 here, and the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, that's the throne of the beast, and his kingdom, which is what? The whole world, was full of darkness. And they gnawed their tongues for pain and blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. And elsewhere here it talks about sores that do not heal. So we know it's skin cancer. That's almost the ancient definition of skin cancer. And then it says, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up. Same thing is going on with the water everywhere else. And people say, see, it's that hydroelectric dam the Syrians are building on the Euphrates. That's the reason this happens. No, pay attention. It's the sun. It's the sun shining and evaporating up water all over the planet. And that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. Okay, so the kings of the east. That doesn't say the armies of the east. But then it says, and I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of, now come is not in the original text, that's been added by the translators. So I saw three unclean spirits like frogs out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So now it's pretty clear. All three of these guys are alive and well and ruling on the earth. For they are the spirits of devils. Now how do you see that in the dark? Must glow in the dark. Okay? For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles. Miracles? Whoa! Which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Now, that seems pretty clear here. All the kings of the world are going to be involved in this battle. Everybody who has any political, religious authority is going to be brought somewhere to a battle. To the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Now this is the same battle we were talking about in chapter 6, the same battle we were talking about in chapter 11. Now here we are in chapter 16 talking about it. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watches and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. Now, this is a well-known Hebrew place. It's Har, means mountain. It literally means the mount or the city, because they used to build cities on mountaintops because it was a fortified place. Or the light. They would put signal fires on the tops of mountains. So mountaintops were places of light where they had cities and fortresses. Okay? So this is a mountaintop of Megiddo. So there's somebody on that mountain that he is especially targeting here. Somebody on the mountain. But there's a whole bunch of people gathered in the plain of Megiddo, which stretches out in front of the mountain, like a big assembly hall. Okay, well, this place is located next to Nazareth in Galilee. You could go to Nazareth, where Jesus was raised, his family home there. The house of David had set up a little section there in Galilee. They had the Mount of Megiddo is where Solomon had his stables, and his generals would hang out there on Armageddon. And they would train the cavalry officers on the plain of Megiddo in front of them, because they could sit up there and they could watch the maneuvers and signal back and forth. No, I told you to go to the right, not the left. You know, they do all that kind of stuff up there. And then there would be the town of Sepphoris, which was the capital of Galilee at the time. And it was built on a hilltop, a city on a hill that can't be hid, Jesus called it. And that was where Joseph of Arimathea and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and their family came from, that side of the family of the house of David. And this is where people lived who were the arms merchants and the metals experts, the metallurgy experts, for the house of David, Nathan's side of the family, basically. Solomon ruled from Jerusalem, and Nathan was up there in Sepphoris, and they would use this area as a military training area. Now, Solomon's a really wise, smart guy. This guy's a brilliant guy. He said, look, if I stage my soldiers and my cavalry all around the borders of Israel, then all of my neighbors will think I'm getting ready to invade them. And I'll get paranoid. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move them into the center of Israel, to Galilee, to Megiddo. And I'm going to keep them there, by Sepphoris, where the family metallurgy business is located, where we make armor and helmets and swords and experiment with alloys and stuff, and where we have our nice summer homes up there on the hill where it's cooler. And so I'm going to locate it there, by the family estate. And I'm also going to set up a bunch of signal towers from other mountaintops, so that if somebody attacks Israel, they'll light a fire and signal, like Indians with smoke signals and so forth, same concept. You're going to signal that somebody's attacking from Syria, or somebody's attacking from Egypt, or from Arabia, or whatever, so we'll have advance warning. And by the time the enemy reaches our border, we'll be able to send our cavalry down the hill from Megiddo, and this plain, which is a high plain in the central highlands of Israel, downhill to the border areas, so the horses won't be worn out by the time they get there. And they'll be running downhill toward the enemy, and meet them head-on at a full gallop, so to speak. So this is Solomon's plan. So that's why this area was there. It was intended as a military staging area. And he had his stables up there on Megiddo. Now, Megiddo means gathering place. And Har Megiddo means the mountain of the gathering. In other words, the mountain at the foot of which, at the plain in front of which, we gather our cavalry and our soldiers and so forth in this one central location, so that we can send them out to the borders to meet invasions. All right? So now listen to this. Verse 16, Revelation 16. And he gathered them together in a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon, the mountain of the gathering. See the point? So it's about gathering everybody together. Who's he gathering together? Back up to the verse 14 there, where he says there, for they are the spirits of devils working miracles, for the beast, the false prophet, the dragon, for the spirits of devils working miracles. I want to emphasize that. These are the sides of Satan that Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, all the workings of a lie. See, Paul's read this book. They are going to work these signs and wonders, all the workings of a lie, he calls them. able to deceive those who do not have a love of the truth so as to be saved. That's Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So here's the text. Go forth unto the kings of the earth with these miracles to deceive people with these signs and wonders of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. And he gathered them together into the place which is called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. And right in the midst of that it says, Behold, I come as a thief. Behold is he that watches, and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, unless they see his shame. Now, Paul says, For that day shall not come until they cry peace and safety. And then sudden destruction comes upon them, like a thief in the night. Paul's read the book of Revelation. He's read chapter 16. He's seen it. When he wrote those words, he knew this. He'd already seen this passage here. And so here is this text which is saying, well, right as they're gathering these guys to the Battle of Armageddon, Christ shows up. And what is he doing here? He's gathering his elect to him. He's sending forth his angels. It is dark, see. The world's in darkness. And here are these spirits going out and luring the kings to the Battle of Armageddon. So they must have some kind of artificial light or torches or something to get there. And they all show up at this central gathering place in the dark. This is creepy, crawly stuff. When you think about it, try to picture this. This is the Battle of Armageddon. It's dark there. The sun isn't shining. Miraculous spirit beings from Satan are tricking people who do not have the love of the truth so as to be saved. They're tricking them into going there to worship the man of sin, the son of perdition. Okay? And what does Paul say in 2 Thessalonians? Who will be destroyed by the brightness of his coming. Referring back to Christ again. By the brilliance, the Greek word here is epiphaneia, the brilliance of his visible appearing, his parousia, by the epiphaneia of his parousia, the brightness of his visible coming. So here, the sun is dark, people's eyes are getting adjusted to the darkness, they're using their little cell phone lights to get around, you know, we are the world, you know, they're waving their cell phones back and forth, huge crowds of people, you know, thinking that they're being holy here, worshiping the beast. And Christ is coming back, and he is sending forth his angels. They're gathering his elect, who are hiding out all over the world, trying to avoid the mark of the beast, right? They're gathering his elect from the four corners. They're raising the dead. Here are Satan and his angels trying to keep up by performing miracles to deceive the kings of the world, to gather them together, and their captains and their armies, to the Battle of Armageddon. 200 million? Well, I don't know. The Greek is myriads of myriads. They didn't have a number for 200 million, folks. It's 200 myriads of myriads, whatever that is. It's a lot of people. And they're gathered to Megiddo. They're gathered to the plain. They're on horseback. Parade horses. Okay? This is a parade. We got kings here. All the kings of the world, we're told, are gathered here. All the world's public officials. John McCain will show up for sure because he'll sell out for anything. Everybody's here. They're all present. Except for the Christians. Because they've been taken by Christ, they've been taken up, and then all these people are waiting here below to see what happens next. And here's what happens next. After the word Armageddon, verse 17, the next word is, and the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, it's also the seventh trumpet, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne of God, obviously, saying, it is done. It is finished. Can anything come after that? That's the end of the story here. Well, it's not the last judgment still to come, and 1,000 years and all that stuff. But as far as this age is concerned, those guys in that valley of Megiddo are now toast. Look what happens next. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings. Now they're in this dark valley. They've all got their little iPhones shining their lights and waving them back and forth in front of the beast or whatever they do to show that they're there. And their horses are kind of rustling a little bit, you know. But it's very dark. They're all their parade uniforms and their swords and everything. And there were lightnings and voices and thunders, and they're hearing voices in the heavens. They're hearing voices up there. And they're hearing thunder up in the heavens over their heads. And they're seeing flashes of lightning, and their eyes aren't used to the light. Okay? And then it says, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since there was man upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. Back to Zechariah chapter, I think it's 14, it talks about this great earthquake, like the days of Uzziah, and it talks about his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, you know, that day. This is the day Christ is going to go back to the Mount of Olives, but he's not there yet. He's up there in Megiddo. And so this is that same day. That great earthquake is now, it's split the Mount of Olives in two. The city of Jerusalem's being split. Okay? Here are the 7,000, the whole family's died. Here are the two witnesses who are being brought back to life. All of this is happening at this moment here. This is all taking place. That's why verse 15 is inserted in there. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. That's the rapture there. That's the resurrection. That's us being caught up to meet him in the air as he comes. This is all happening simultaneously. One of the problems that John has is that this is a multi-dimensional event. It's happening at several levels at once. Stuff going on over your head, stuff going on amongst the Christians, stuff going on with the kings of the earth, with Satan in the battle of Megiddo. You get the point here. Something going on with the sun and the climate. All sorts of things happening at once. So it's in the dark. There are bolts of lightning suddenly, thunder overhead, and the horses are getting a little nervous, and you can hear the horses beginning to whinny, and the kings in their beautiful uniforms starting to get scared, and the sweat's dripping down their faces. They're getting nervous. What's going on? What are those voices over our heads? Who's up there? Who could be over us? Who could be above us? Who's up there? Great earthquake suddenly occurs. All of a sudden, the ground underneath of them. Gee, if Jerusalem's being sliced in half like that, can you imagine what's going on just north of it up there in Megiddo and Galilee? And the ground is shaking, and the horses now are panicking, and people are now jostling each other. And Arabs are being jostled against Russians, and Russians against Persians, and Africans against Hungarians, and so forth. And it says that the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. That doesn't say some of the cities of the nations. It says the cities of the nations fell. Not a few of them, not some of them, not 10%, not a tithe of them. It doesn't say all, but the implication is that all or virtually all of them fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. The mountains weren't found? Well, gee, wouldn't that include Armageddon itself? That mountain? The one that Hage is standing on? And the mountain isn't found. Well, there's a way this can happen. If a vibration hits the earth so strong that it literally melts the mountains, it actually causes them to dissolve. I was in the Loma Prieta quake in 1989 in San Francisco, and they said that the ground there, because it was sand, basically started to liquefy. And it didn't get wet, but it acted like a liquid. And that's the reason that you saw buildings just sink into the ground. And you saw things that were very odd looking. The ground was no longer solid underneath your feet. Everything was shaking. The whole thing was rolling underneath of you. And this went on for about 30 seconds. And I was walking from room to room, and it was like the whole thing was just rocking and rolling there. It was really amazing. I was carrying a glass of orange juice, I think, at the time. it was a time where everything got out of kilter. After it was over, you looked outside, and all the wires on the telephone poles were taut or sagging or whatever. Everything was out of kilter. And all of the tiles on your floors were now moved out of position, and you could see the gaps here and there. And you hadn't realized it while it was going on, but everything was shifting. Everything was liquid for a while. And they said that the ground there, because of the nature of the soil and so forth, was liquefied. The quake was miles beneath us. The epicenter was miles underground. And this was only a 6.8. You can imagine, this is the greatest quake ever since there were men upon the earth. The liquefaction effect, not turning to water, but dissolving because of the vibration of everything literally starting to liquefy, and the mountains are melting. They're as if they were a liquid. They're not actually getting wet, but they're just sort of settling down. And here's the Antichrist up on his mountaintop, and all of a sudden, the mountain dissolves beneath his feet. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it says here that, and there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. I figured out what this is. It's about the weight of a cannonball, standard cannonball. It says here, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. Okay, then it goes into Babylon the Great. We go into a new section. Now, because it has to backtrack. See, so what is this moment where this hailstone falls? It's talking about something coming out of heaven that is a plague of hailstones that's so great that each stone weighs as much as a cannonball. When we have bad thunderstorms out in the Midwest, the hailstones are heavy enough that they crush the heads of the cattle, and they kill the cattle by cracking their skulls. Okay? But you could have hailstones so bad that you could literally flatten a herd of cattle to a height of 2 or 3 inches. This happened at the end of the last ice age. There were some hailstorms so bad that the large megafauna or large life forms like mastodons and things like that, this stuff was crushed to ground level. It was as if a giant anvil dropped upon them from heaven. Anvil's pretty heavy. It sounds like a cartoon, you know. But just imagine a big, flat anvil coming down out of heaven and flattening and crushing everything underneath of it. The blood would be squeezed out of it like grapes. And there is a description in here about the winepress of the wrath of God, which is in, I think it's in chapter 9, isn't it? I'm trying to remember where that is. I forget which chapter that is. But anyway, Christ is treading the winepress of God, and he crushes the grapes. And this image here, I'm sorry, it's chapter 14. He says, and I heard a voice in heaven saying unto me, right blessed are they the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth, because they're about to be raised from the dead. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their works do follow them. That is, their works of righteousness, their faith. Without faith it is impossible to please God, for God counted it unto righteousness, as righteousness unto Abraham. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Who could that be? Okay. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. There's two sickles, see? And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, the second one now, thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, cast it in the great winepress of the wrath of God. Uh-oh. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs, which is many miles. Okay, so the blood flowed for miles. This actually happened, by the way, in some of the events that happened in the first century after crucifixion. There were some battles that were fought in the Holy Land where blood flowed for miles from the scene of the battle. I don't know whether John had seen that or heard about that, whether that had happened before he wrote this particular passage. But that is the kind of thing that goes on over there. Now, what battle is that? That's the Battle of Armageddon. So the grapes, there's two harvests here. The first one is the harvest. It says, Christ says, at the end of the age, God will send forth his angels, and they will take his elect out of the earth, and put it into his barn. And then he will gather the wicked out and cast them into the fire to be burned. Okay? So they will be like the chaff that's burned. So he tells parables about this event. It's very clear there are two gatherings at the end. The first gathering is the rapture of the saints to protect them from what? From the hailstones. Because they're going to fall all over the earth. They're going to crush everybody. But especially here at Armageddon, at this mountain of Megiddo and at this plain of Megiddo, and they're going to be crushed. And the horses are going to be crushed. I'm going to prove that to you in a minute. Okay, so that's the end of the chapter 16 passage, and a little reference back there to chapter 14, at the end of chapter 14. Now let's go here to, and let me read the first verse of chapter 15, right after the grapes are crushed here. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. Okay, so you see here that we're dealing with the end of the sequence of events here. So everything comes to a climax with what? The hailstorm, which crushes the grapes of the winepress of the wrath of God, which is the Battle of Armageddon, which Christ on his horse is coming back, and all the kings of the earth and all of their armies are gathered together, not to fight each other, to honor the beast. Why is Christ coming back at this particular moment? Because if all the kings of the world give their allegiance to the false Christ, then the true Christ has to step out of the darkness, so to speak, and show himself. He has to show up at this point. He has no choice. This is the moment when he's got to be there. You've got to step forward and say, wait a second, that guy's an imposter. I am the Messiah. And he has to show himself at that point. Now, he doesn't actually have to say he's the Messiah because it's going to be pretty obvious. The sun's gone dark, this hailstorm's crushing all the other guys, the very mountain the false Christ is standing on melts beneath his feet. I think everybody will get it by then. Anybody who shows up in charge after that has got to be the real guy. Okay? Jesus said in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, he says at the end, he says that you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming in heaven, and he says that at this time he says the sun will be dark and the moon will not give its light. Okay? So he will come back in darkness. So if it isn't dark out, it's not the Battle of Armageddon, and Christ hasn't come. How many different ways have I given you to see that it isn't Armageddon yet? Okay? And there's a whole bunch of these. Now, go to the last one here. This is chapter 19. This is the fourth section. Do you want to start a third file? Up to you. I got enough material. We can do a whole new file here if you want.
No. Okay. All righty.
I'm going to get into Gog and Magog.
Okay, you've been listening to Olaf Hage. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is the Byte Show. Move to part 3.